All right, so we are starting the Flying Geese section of the Dilly Dally quilt. And we're just going to talk about flying geese for just a minute, and then we're going to move on to the block demos, and I'm going to show you how to do these methods. All right, so flying geese have a lot of use in quilt. You'll see them mostly as star points, I think, but they can be used as a lot of different things. A lot of quilters struggle with them. They are kind of difficult. I'm changing up my methods just a little bit for Dilly Dally and going to be making them in a little bit of a different way. But we are going to be covering two different methods for flying geese. The first is the easiest, is the snowball method. It makes one flying geese unit at a time, and there's a little bit of waste involved in it, just like with all snowball units. The second method is the 4 at a time method, and this is a method that I really, really love because there's no waste. It makes 4 geese at a time. And in the past, I've always written it where your flying geese unit comes out at exactly the right size. So there's no more work to do after you've pieced it. But the feedback I've gotten is that a lot of people struggle making them at exactly the right size. So I'm changing my methods up so that we actually end up making them a little bit larger than they need to be, and then we trim them down to size, all of which I'm going to show you. And then on these flying geese blocks within Dilly Dally quilt, we're going to bounce back and forth between these methods depending on what the block needs. If the block needs 4 geese, obviously we're going to go with the 4 at a time method. If it needs 1, we're going to change it up back to that snowball method. So I'm not going to do a separate demo for these blocks here. I'm going to do it within the blocks. By the end of this, you're going to be confidently flying through your flying geese. All right, here is our first flying geese unit. This is block number 38. We're going to be using the snowball method for this block. So 1 at a time geese, 2 different colors. Let's have a look at this block. All right, so here is A fabric, B fabric, and then everything else is your background fabric. And this is going to provide some space for you to fussy cut if you want to. So I'll let you decide if that's something you want. All right, so let's cover fussy cutting rectangles really fast. I know we've covered fussy cutting pretty extensively in the class, but I want to cover this just because it's a rectangle and it's a little different. So I've gone ahead and marked my ruler at the 3.5 inch line. All right, so I put the tape, so this to this is 3.5 inches. My ruler is 6.5 inches. If you're working with a bigger ruler, go ahead and block off a 6.5 inch rectangle this way, all right? And then our center point is the 3.25 line. So I'm just going to center along one of these little flowers. I want that to be in the very center, 3.25 right here, and then 1.75 this way. So right there's my center. You can mark it with a Sharpie if you want to, but that's my center. So I'm going to put it about where I want. That way I can fussy cut, just adding a little extra charm to this block. All right. And then, I don't have my rotating cutting mat, so I'm just going to rotate around and then cut this way. All right, so now we know that this and this is accurate. So we're going to line up that 3.5 inch line right here of our ruler. Line it up right here on the top of the piece, or you're looking at it on the bottom. All right, these sides should already be cut, so we're just going to cut this top part off. All right, and there is my 3.5 inch B rectangle. Here is my A rectangle, which I did the same thing to. All right, so that's it for fussy cutting. I'm going to finish cutting this quilt up, and then I'll see you when I have it done. All right, so here's my A and B rectangles. Here's my 4 3.5 inch background squares. And if you're drawing lines, we're going to draw lines on the back of all of these background squares. Let's go to the sewing machine and piece together. So if you're using washi tape diagonal seam tape or your laser like I am, go ahead and set it up for that you can sew right here on this center line, just like that. And we're just going to take each of these units and we're going to put that background square on one of the sides. And if you drew lines, your line is running like this, okay? And then you're just going to sew. And for you, if you drew the lines, you're sewing directly on your drawn line, which is right here. If you're using the tape or the laser, you're watching this corner and you're going to make sure that the tape or the laser is splitting your corner. All right, next piece, another background square. Fit it into that same side. Same thing. All right, and then we're going to cut our thread, cut the connecting thread. We have pieces that look just like this. Let's go to our pressing mat. We're going to set these seams and then I'll meet you back at the cutting mat. Okay, so here we are. I'm going to cut off this corner of each of these units just the same way we always snowball. And here's my stitch line. I'm going to put the 1/4 inch line of the ruler directly on my stitches. And if you're just like me and you're using white thread on white fabric, which you can't see, I always just take that 1/4 inch line of the ruler and just have it split those corners. So I know that that's where I've stitched. And then we just cut. Just like that. Same thing on this one. Line it up. Cut. And this is the waist I was talking about. There's your waist. Now you could sew these together and have half square triangles, but usually I don't have time for that. So they go in the scrap bin and then we're ready to go to the pressing mat. We're going to press these seams open just to make everything flatter and just give us a better chance at precision. So I'm putting my finger right into that seam, splitting it open, and then pressing. And just remember that you've cut everything on the bias here, so you don't want to be going like this. You're going up and down, up and down. So it looks like that. I'm going to do the same thing for this one. There. Just like this. I'm going to give it a little bit of pressing spray and press. Those beeps are me pressing the sting button. I get asked that a lot. All right. So there is half of a Flying Geese unit. Let's go back to the sewing machine. We've got these two pieces and we're going to take those background squares and we're going to put them on the opposite side of our Flying Geese unit. But this time, really, really careful here. You are going to be sewing that line in the mirror image of this side. So it's going to be like this time. So before we were like this time we're like this, okay? And then you're going to do the same thing. You're going to either sew directly on your drawn line or you're going to use your tape, laser, whatever you're using, and you're going to line it up to this corner down here. Yesterday, I made 2 of these sewn in the wrong direction on the second half of my geese units. So, you know, do check yourself. Be mindful that you're sewing in the right direction because it's easy to get mixed up, especially if you're like, you know, working your way through these blocks. Your mind is somewhere else and you're just going through the motions. Okay, cut my thread, cut the thread that connects them. And now I have this, all right? So let's go set our seams and then we'll meet at the pressing mat. All right, so we're doing the same thing. We're just doing it on the opposite side. We're gonna line up the 1/4 inch line of our ruler right on our stitches or split that corner and cut. Same thing on this one. All right, back to the pressing mat. All right, we are pressing these seams open. So slip your finger into that seam and press up and down with your iron. Just like that. And you should have a 1/4 inch of space right there, or maybe just a smidgen more than a 1/4 inch, hopefully. Okay, we're going to give them a little bit of pressing spray. Now, flying geese tend to always have the same issues. These geese here, pretty decent. I noticed just a little bit of this on this one. I can measure it just to make sure that it's accurate. And it is accurate. The problem is it's just a little this way. And just like with all of my snowball units, mine always end up a little bit wonky. But the important thing is that I have that space. Now in this method, we are not trimming these down. They should come out to size. You can trim them, but I wouldn't, honestly. I would just, whatever you've got, I would go with, because you trim this and you're just going to end up losing your point right here. So I don't recommend trimming them. I mean, this is kind of, we've done a lot of snowballs in this quilt, and this is kind of what we're kind of used to. And snowballing is just an imperfect method. I don't know anybody who gets perfect snowballs all the time. Mine always have a bit of wonk. They're always a smidgen short, and I'm not really sure what I can do differently. So I just try to get them as close as I can get them and just go with it. All right, we're going to sew these two together. So I'm going to put this one on top here. Now, we talked about this in several of our past demos for this quilt. We need to sew right here, but I encourage you to flip it over and sew right here instead, so that you can see this. And that's pretty much whenever you're sewing with Flying Geese units. That's what I would recommend you do, because this right here, that top tip of that triangular point, is your point for your geese unit. So if you know where this is, you know that you need to stay above it right here, and you don't lose your point, because if you go below it, you've lost your point. All right, so flipping it backwards and seeing it this way, I feel like it's really, really beneficial to us. And then let's say that I didn't quite have enough space right here. You decide what you do, but let me just tell you what I do. If I'm going at my 1/4 inch seam right here, and I get right there and it's going to lose my point, I'm going to go a less than a 1/4 inch seam. So I'm going to go, whatever happens, I'm coming on this side of it so I don't lose that point, because points are important to me. Now you decide what is important to you, but does this weaken the seam? A little bit, but I don't think it weakens it enough to not do it. So I'm definitely going to be doing this. I think I've got plenty of space here. I might actually use a scant 1/4 inch seam to do this. But we're gonna sew right across here. And just another look at what that looks like. It looks like this, right, when you flip it down, but we can't see a point right here. So we're going to flip it over and do it on this side. Okay, so go do that on your own, and I'll meet you back here. All right, all sewn. That's what it looks like. We're going to set this seam. And then we're going to press this center seam open. And mine was a little tight, so I think I barely got this point. But this is kind of why I don't like the snowball method. I just, I prefer to do the 4 at a time and you know, trim them down. And also, if you did lose your point, it's okay. No big deal. Flying geese are hard. We're going to put some pressing spray, and we're going to press. And if you didn't get it and you want to try for it again, you know, go ahead and seam rip and sew it. I just barely got it. Barely. Hold on, I'm going to bring it to you close. I'm just trying to make sure it's pressed completely flat. Here's my block 38. Let me show you the other one, which this one is my test block, and it came out so much better than this one. You can see those 2 points. That one was just absolute perfection. not so much. So I've been quilting a long time. I still do this. So, you know, I want this, but I don't always get it. Sometimes I get this. So, you know, just kind of let it fall off you. You want to seam rip it? Seam rip it. If you don't want to seam rip it, move on. Don't let people make you feel weird for just being human, okay? All right, so that is it for block 38. I will see you on the next block. Block number 39. Super cute. I like this one. I like this one a lot. We'll get a close-up in a minute, but we're going to use the 4 at a time method. We're going to make them a teensy-weensy bit bigger, and then we're going to trim them down. This method takes longer as far as trimming. I mean, there's trimming. I don't like trimming, but there it is. It does create no waste, and it makes perfect flying geese units. I mean, you're not going to get better geese units than this method. All right, so there it is. Let's go take a closer look. Block number 39. The minty green is your A fabric. The lavender is your B fabric. Everything else is background. And here is what you need for this block. All right, here we are. We're going to put the 2.5 inch background squares. We're putting those to the side. And we are going to put our A rectangles to the side. Uh-oh. And we're just going to focus on this right here. We've got our B square and we've got our 2 inch background squares. If you're drawing lines, you're drawing them on the back of these, okay? Let's go to the sewing machine and learn how to make 4 at a time flying geese units. So we've got our background squares and our B square, and we're just going to put 2 of these to the side and focus on these other 2. Turn it at a 45-degree angle to you. 1 square is going up here at the top. We're going to be flush with this corner. All right, the other one is going here at this corner, and they are going to overlap just a little bit. So again, make it flush, just like this. Should look like that. If you drew lines, the line is going right across here, just like that. All right, and if you are using a laser, you're going to shift to your laser line being a 1/4 inch from your center. So get that set up a little bit. And if you've got your diagonal seam tape, you didn't have to change anything. If you've got basic washi tape, again, you want the line to be a 1/4 inch from the center, okay? So shifting up from the snowball method. And then, if you've got your laser, you want to watch here. Make sure that laser is splitting this corner. If you've got your washi tape is splitting this corner as well, okay? So then we're going to start sewing. Remember, we're sewing a scant 1/4 inch seam because we are trimming these down. You could pin these if you wanted them to. I don't ever pin them. All right. Cut our thread, and then we're going to rotate around, and we're going to do the opposite side. So if you drew that line, now you're sewing a scant 1/4 inch from the opposite side. We end up with a piece like this. Let's go set our seam, and then we'll meet at the pressing mat. I'm not sure if I said meet at the pressing mat, but I've already set my seam, and we're meeting at the cutting mat, all right? So what we're going to do is if you drew your line, you're just going to cut directly on your drawn line. If you did not draw a line and you use tape or the laser, you're going to take the edge of your ruler. It needs to split corner to corner here, just like this. That edge of my ruler is running through those corners, and we're just going to cut these units in half like this. Okay, let's go back to the pressing mat. So we're going to flip these just like this, and we're going to press this seam open. So slip your finger in there and press. And I like to just do these a little carefully. And we're going up and down. I'm going up and down a little bitty taps with my iron. I'm not doing this. Okay. Go back up. Uh-oh. Same thing with this one, but because this triangle is on top before this one was, I'm just going to flip it around this way so that I can deal with the triangle that's on top first. Same thing. Slip my finger into that seam and press it open. Okay. So now we've got this. 2 units that look like this. And we're going to go back to the sewing machine now. I'm going to take one of those remaining background squares, and we're going to put that background square right there flush with the corner of the B square. And if you drew a line, your line is going to be going right down this way. And now we'll sew a scant 1/4 inch on both sides of that center point line. If you're using your laser like me, or you're using this seam tape or washi tape, remember to watch that corner and just make sure that your laser or your tape is splitting the corner. So grab the other unit, same thing, background square, flush in the corner of the B, and then again sew a scant 1/4 inch on the side of the center point line. Watch, if you're using that laser or washi tape, watch that corner. Cut your thread and then cut the thread that connects them. Now we're going to rotate around and we're going to do the opposite side of that center point line. So scant 1/4 inch seam, and then right here I've got a little bit of a lip on my needle plate, so I always like to make sure that that seam gets over it. You can feel the bit of bulk under there, so if it feels good I go with it. If it doesn't, feels that little bumpy, I just lift it up. Grab the other unit, same thing. Cut my thread. When you're sewing it this way, if you come right here at this point, that means you've sewn a full 1/4 inch seam. If you're a little bit, towards the center, that means you're going at that scant. A 1/4 inch seam would be okay, but we have more room to trim them down if you use the scant. So I like to, use the scant. But now we have 2 pieces like this. I'm going to go to my pressing mat. I'm going to set the seams, and then we'll meet back at the cutting mat. So just like before, if you drew your line, you're cutting directly on your drawn line. If not, you're just going to take the edge of your ruler, you're going to split this little square right into its corners, and then you're going to cut those units in half so that they look like that. I'm going to do the same thing over here. All right, so now we have 4 of these little beauties. Let's go back to our pressing mat. All right, we're just going to press these seams open, just like we've been doing. Look like that. Slip your finger into that seam and press. Just like that, and I'm going to do that for all of these units. Grab some pressing spray, give them a little spray, and press again. Make them behave. Honestly, I usually spray them even when they are behaving, but I just want them crisp, and the more crisp you can get them, the easier they are to trim accurately and then sew up accurately. They'll look like that. You can already see that they're better than the snowball method, I think. I mean, look at that 1/4 inch at the top. It's actually a little bit more than a 1/4 inch. That looks really nice. No wonkiness. They're just a better Flying Geese unit. One more. All right, let's go trim them down. Okay, so we're trimming these to 1.5 by 2.5 inches. Same way we always trim everything down, but a little bit different because it's, you know, a rectangle. So let me just show you how to place that tape on your ruler. All right, so the first piece of tape, you're going to put it on the 1.5 inch line. And the second piece of tape, we're going to put on the 2.5 inch line. All right, and that little rectangle, that is the size we want our Flying Geese unit. All right, I'm going to use a Sharpie, but just in case you have never seen the Sharpie on your ruler, you wipe it off with just a little piece of scrap fabric and nail polish remover, and it comes right off. I'll show it to you here. This came from my trash can, just a little piece that was cut. Get a little bit of nail polish remover on it, and then it takes the marker right off so that you can mark all over this ruler and know things about it, and the mark come off. All right, so now we're going to take our Sharpie. We're going to go 1.25 inch on that side and 1/4 inch on the opposite side. Where those lines meet, that's where we're going to put that dot, and that dot is just going to give us a place to put the very tip point of your Flying Geese unit. So that's where that's going, right there. Get it in place. And you also want to look at one more thing here. The corners on this side and where your tape meet right there, you want that to be exactly on the seam. So take your time and try to place it just so. It may take you a minute to get it. You shouldn't be cutting very much off the top. And then cut there, and then cut just a little bit across the top. I'm telling you, it is just a tiny smidgen. It's mostly that little dog ear. And then we're going to use the edges of the tape, and that we're going to trim it to that edge that we've already cleaned up of the Flying Geese unit. So get it lined up again. And then cut, cut, and there we go. A perfect 1.5 by 2.5 inch Flying Geese unit. I mean, that's perfect. That is so much better than that other method. Things to note about it is that there's a 1/4 inch or more up at the top, and then the corners go right into there. It splits those corners perfectly. And I even like this trimming down. It's a little bit more time consuming, a little bit more finicky, but it makes for a great Flying Geese unit. All right, so now I'm going to do the same for the remaining 3 units. Get them all trimmed to 1.5 by 2.5 inches. We're going to grab those A rectangles, and they are going to go right up under our Flying Geese units so that we get a shape that looks like that. I want to chain piece mine, so I'm going to turn them just like this, so just for easy grabbing at the sewing machine. So go to the sewing machine, get that done, and I'll meet you back at the pressing mat. Okay, all sewn. We're going to set the seams real quick, and then we're going to press toward the A rectangles. So push it back just like this and press. And I'm going to do that for all of these remaining units. All right, we get this cute little shape, and now we are ready to do layout. So let's grab those 2.5 inch background squares. One is going in the middle, and then the other 4 are going to go on all the 4 corners. All right, and then our units are going to go around the center. They're going to rotate around. So make sure that that A rectangle is touching that center square, just like that. And we're going to sew this into rows.
So you're going to sew your first row, second row, and third row. Go do that on your own and I'll meet you back here. Okay, all sewn, and now we're going to press toward the background squares. So on this row, set my seams, smooth toward the background squares. Seams are going this way, and press. Middle row is going toward the center, set my seam, smooth, and press. Same thing for this one. And then the final row, set my seams, smooth, and press toward those background squares. All right, and now we're going to sew these rows together. We have 2 places to make sure our seams nest, there and there. I'm going to do that on my own, and I'll meet you back here when I have it done. Okay, all sewn, and we're going to set our seams. Lots of bulk in this one, I think. All right, right side down, and then we're pressing these cross seams open, so slip your finger in and press. Same thing with this seam. Slip finger in, press. Flip it over. Oh, it's adorable. Let me get those seams sorted a little bit more. And then some pressing spray and press again. All right, and there it is, block number 39.
To improve your quilting skills, join Quilt Class for just $15 a month. You'll get a new pattern, step-by-step demos, and access to a supportive quilting community. Learn, create, and connect, all from the comfort of your home. Sign up today.